Hi, it's me, Ingrid INFP, and I'm going to be talking about alexithymia or alexithymia. I don't know how to say it. Um, and INFPs. Alexithymia is when a person, according to this website, struggles to distinguish between emotions and bodily sensations. Alexithymia is broadly considered a personality trait. While this is not a medical diagnosis, alexithymia is associated with several medical and mental health conditions, such as autism. Roughly an estimated 1 in 10 people experiences alexithymia. Okay, so that's 10% of the population. That's a pretty large percentage of the population. I don't know if I experience alexithymia or not. What I will say is that, well, there are more people in the world that experience alexithymia than INFPs, because INFPs, according to some study made a while ago, are only 4% of the population, while alexithymia is 10% of the population. Now, alexithymia is more common in men, but that might be because of the socialization. So, alexithymia occurs on a spectrum, just like autism does. And a person can have mild to severe alexithymia traits. It's broadly considered a personality trait. It is not a medical diagnosis, so it's not in the DSM manual. And the rate is higher among neurodivergent people, including ADHD and autism, and those experiencing mental health conditions such as depression, anxiety, or chronic pain, and other health conditions. What are the core features of alexithymia? Difficulties identifying and describing feelings, difficulty differentiating between typical bodily processes, hunger cues, exhaustion, and emotions, anxiety, sadness. An externally oriented cognitive style, paying more attention to external things happening around you than to internal experiences, and challenges generating mental images and fantasies. So, I'm going to talk about why it's not that impossible that some INFPs might have alexithymia, but also why it's difficult to reconcile being an INFP and having alexithymia. Because some of these traits are contradictory to the INFP traits. So I don't think that we'll be coming to any conclusions, but we'll see. So what they're trying to say is that just like autism, it's a spectrum. So, and it's not a spectrum on the line, it's a spectrum in like space. So you can have different levels on each trait, and that creates kind of like a star diagram. And together is your profile of alexithymia, you could say. So they capture 7 areas in this star kind of diagram. A person may have alexithymia in some areas, but not in others. The most areas for autistic and ADHD people of alexithymia are difficulties in identifying and describing feelings. And that is the part that I would say is maybe a little bit more like an INFP can have. So then they go on to distinguish primary alexithymia and secondary alexithymia. Primary alexithymia is basically a personality trait that you're born with, and that's consistent across time and situations. But secondary alexithymia might result from a recent medical diagnosis like PTSD. So there is that. Alexithymia can be present from birth, and in that case, it's like part of your baseline personality. What does it cause? What is the cause? Genetics, environment? We're not sure. So then they have this thing called the Alexithymia Wheel of Traits. And so I will put a link in the description. But there is difficulty describing emotions, right? Difficulty identifying emotions. Then we have sexual difficulties, externally oriented, interpersonal difficulties, restricted imagination, and vicarious interpretation. Okay, so they're going to go through what these things are. Difficulty identifying feelings. People who experience difficulty identifying emotions experience confusion about their internal experiences, including emotions. Their bodily sensations often cause confusion, and they struggle to distinguish, for example, between hunger and anxiety. The ability to identify emotions plays a key role in our ability to regulate emotions. Difficulty in this area has been linked to depression, self-harm, and suicidal behavior. And that's, I think, where it's not as antithetical to INFPs as it might seem, because I think that INFPs spend a lot of time, are very interested in figuring out the emotions, but that doesn't mean that you have a skill in it. And often, like, I will get cranky about being tired or hungry. And sometimes I'll be like confused, like, why am I feeling this way? You know, and then I'm realized like, oh, I've only slept 4 hours last night. That must be it. But it takes me a long time to figure that out. So that is that kind of thing. It's hard to sometimes identify what the feeling is. I'm not saying that I have alexithymia, but I can relate to certain things of this. Difficulty describing feelings. Now, I think that is a real INFP thing. We have a hard time describing things. While difficulty describing feelings sounds similar to identifying feelings, it is slightly different. Difficulty describing feelings refers to the difficulty with finding words for your feelings and being able to express these feelings to others. People who struggle with this often experience difficulty labeling emotions and finding the right words to describe their feelings. Descriptors of emotions may be vague, general, and diffuse. Difficulty describing emotions is associated with more relationship difficulty. And yes, I think that I have a hard time describing my emotions, especially like when I go to the doctor or the psychologist. It like takes me such a while to figure out what the emotion that I'm feeling is and how to clearly express that to somebody else. You know, often when I'm angry, I cry. When I'm sad, I cry. When I'm upset, I cry. When I'm frustrated, I cry. When I'm happy, I cry. So it's not like that's helping me, you know. Sometimes I have a hard time like figuring out how to explain what it is I'm feeling. Sometimes all I feel is just bad. I'm like, it just feels bad. I don't know what it is. It just feels bad. You know, it's not like I've found the right label for the emotion. Then we have externally oriented thinking. Externally oriented thinking occurs when a person's thought process is focused externally rather than internally. An externally oriented thinker focuses their energy on external events and tends to avoid focusing on internal experiences. I do not relate, but okay. When a person has high alexithymia traits in this area, this means that they experience difficulty attending to their own emotions and inner states. Externally oriented thinking has been linked with a reduced ability to experience positive emotions, which can contribute to depression and other mood concerns. Right. Sometimes, I mean, I don't relate to this, but sometimes I will just like attend to what needs to be done, you know, with my TE. I will like just go to work and push my emotions to one side, and then like have difficulty like going back to that space of thinking of my internal thoughts, because I just want to stay in this external zone. But it is not my general mental state, you know. I'm pretty much an internal person rather than an external one. That's why I'm an introvert. And also because I'm intuitive, so that makes me even more like focused on the inner world of intuition. Vicarious interpretation of feeling. Vicarious emotions refers to the experience of feeling other people's feelings alongside them. An example of vicarious emotions is when you experience a strong emotion when you learn something has happened to someone else, an emotion that mirrors what they felt. These experiences are often referred to as affective empathy, the experience of feeling alongside the other. This ability to understand what others are experiencing is a key role in developing relationships and creating strong interpersonal connections. They say here that vicarious interpretation of feelings is not always considered a core component of alexithymia, though it is often correlated or linked to core dimensions of alexithymia. And there I think that INFPs can relate. Sometimes I will pick up on somebody's emotion in the room, and I will like it will mess up with my own emotions, you know. Like if somebody's really sad, I'm like, well, I get sad too, you know, even though I was having a good day. Like that could happen. But also if somebody's happy and I'm sad, it kind of, you know, it changes the mood of the room. So yeah, there's that. But I think that this is more something that like high FE users get. That basically they're like sponges for other people's emotions in the room. I see that with, well, basically all the high FE users. Restricted imaginative processes do not relate, okay? Many people with alexithymia, but not all, have a diminished fantasy life with limited imaginative capacities. Such people tend to be oriented towards the concrete world of facts and pragmatics, with little interest in fantasy and imaginative processes. They may have little interest in fantasy, creative efforts, and art. They are also unlikely to spend time daydreaming. Note, this is not always considered a core feature of alexithymia. Like, no, I do not relate. I am not into the facts of pragmatics with little interest in fantasy and imaginative processes. Okay, so yeah, I don't think that a lot of INFPs will relate to that. I do see how certain people seem to say that autistic people have low capacity to fantasy, but that is actually not in the DSM-5. I was pretty imaginative as a child. And while some people with autism have difficulty with imagination, it's rather not the difficulty with imagination, rather than the coordinating your imagination with other people, the social aspect, that is difficult. It's also the fact that autistic people like the repetition. So I would always have the repeating daydreams. It would be the same thing all the time, you know? It's not like I was inventing new things every time. It was pretty much the same story again and again. Which, you know, does not make me less imaginative, you know, but I would imagine the same thing all the time, you know, and I would spend a lot of time daydreaming. Then here comes interpersonal relationship difficulties. These last two subscales, problematic interpersonal relationships and sexual difficulties and disinterest, aren't specifically part of the formal definition of alexithymia, but often correlate with alexithymia. So, alexithymia has been linked to difficulties with empathy, difficulty perceiving other people's perspectives and understanding their feelings and emotions, which negatively influences relationships. The ability to make and deepen relationships. One study found that it was alexithymia rather than autism that led to difficulties in cognitive and affective empathy. Autistic people who do not have alexithymia did not have the same struggles with empathy as autistic people with alexithymia. This has led some researchers to believe that it is alexithymia and not autism that results in difficulty with empathy. So I have difficulties with interpersonal relationships, but I think that it's not because of lack of empathy, it's more because I don't really know what to do with my emotions, do not really relate, but I relate to having relationship difficulties, yes. Sexual difficulties and disinterest. While not a primary feature of alexithymia is often connected to reduced sexual satisfaction and greater detachment from potential sexual partners. It is also associated with sexual shyness and nervousness. This may be related to several factors. Alexithymia is associated with more negative emotion, which appears to impact sexual attitudes. And alexithymia often results in a greater and more avoidant detached attachment structure, which leads to a more avoidant sexual style. People with alexithymia are also more likely to identify as asexual. This may be one reason there is a higher rate of asexual people within the autistic population. Okay, so I relate to being asexual and to being autistic. Now, does that mean that I have alexithymia? Not in the typical definition of it, but in that specific trait, I do have basically the sexual difficulties and disinterest. So in that trait, I would score top score, while in the imagination, I would score like 0 or 1, So I relate to some of these traits, but not all of them. And you don't need to, because this isn't a diagnosis. This is just a trait. And within that large trait, there are several sub-traits. And so I only relate to some of the sub-traits, you could say. I was thinking substrates. No, that's not what I mean. So there are certain tests. So I will see if I can take that test. There are several alexithymia scales. So there are 2 here that they have on the website. There's an online alexithymia test. And this one shows like the star with the 7 different areas. The cons is that it's not used in medical research. So it's not what the researchers use to figure out what alexithymia is. And then there's the Toronto Alexithymia Scale. And this is the one that they do research on. However, the cons with that scale is that it does not provide the detail that the other scale does. So I will do them and I will come back. Okay, so I just did the alexithymia test. The one that it just gives you 1 point. I got 124 points, which shows high alexithymia traits. Doesn't really tell me much. I think that the reason I got a lot of points is because there were a lot of questions about sexual relationships, which I haven't had, so I had to guess. But it was interesting. Let's go and try that one. Okay, so this one, the Embrace Autism test, I got 59. Difficulty describing feelings was 20. Difficulty identify feelings was 23. Externally oriented thinking subtotal is 16. So obviously it's not really like I had a lot of that kind of problem. This test did not have anything about the other parts of the scale, but this is the medically used one, the one that is used for research. So I would say that is the one to use. I'm trying to see where the cutoff is, because they don't really say here. Here. Between 0 to 51, it's no alexithymia. 52 to 60, it's possible alexithymia, and 61 to 100 is alexithymia present. So I'm in the possible alexithymia range. So we don't know, but it is interesting to think that even an INFP could possibly be on the scale. There are some types that I think would be more likely to have alexithymia, especially male people of certain types, because they're taught to not value their emotions. So if I would put somebody who is alexithymic, it would probably be something like an ISTP, something like that, I guess. Though I think that there is something to the fact that if you have SI, I think that the SI makes you understand like your inner sensations. So you would think that the practical bits, the part that does not have much imagination, or the imagination is just for a practical purpose, that is not actually an SJ thing. This is more of an ISTP kind of problem. But you know, any type could have alexithymia, and I think INFPs are unlikely to like have all of the things of alexithymia, especially the imagination one and the externally oriented one. But I invite you guys to take the test, the 2 tests that I have up, and tell me what you think about alexithymia. Have a great day. Bye.